If you check out my video presentation, Arsareth is Not America, Vital Information, Part 7, I talked about the Hebrews that was placed over the Euphrates River in Haran and Gozan by the river, and how they crossed the Euphrates and they went into Africa, what we call Africa today. And I referenced the Gospels in 2nd Ezra chapter 13. But I also talked about in 2nd Kings how the king of Assyria, Shalmaneser, also placed the Hebrews in Halah. And Halah, as you can see in the yellow, is right above the Tigris River. And he also placed Hebrews in the Medes. So in 2nd Kings, as I spoke about in Arsareth is Not America, Vital Information, Part 7, King Shalmaneser of Assyria, it clearly says in 2nd Kings that he carried the Hebrews, the 10 tribes, across the waters with an S, and he placed them in Haran, a harbor, or Gozan by the river, as you can see here in the orange. And he also carried them across the Tigris River and placed them in Halah, as you can see here in the orange. And then he carried them to the Medes, as you can see here in the orange. Now in Part 7, I spoke about the part of the Hebrews that was placed in this area by the Euphrates, by the Gozan and Gozan River and Haran, etc. They crossed the Euphrates as according to 2nd Ezra chapter 13. However, the Hebrews that was placed in Halah by the Tigris River and the Medes in this area above the Tigris rivers, 2nd Ezra do not mention anything about these Hebrews crossing the Tigris River and crossing the Euphrates River to head south towards Israel. It doesn't mention that. If they was to head south towards Israel, as did the Hebrews that was placed in this area by the Euphrates, as mentioned in 2nd Ezra, then they would have had to cross the Tigris River, go another 40 to 50 miles, and cross the Euphrates River and continue south, as the Hebrews in this area did when they crossed the Euphrates River, and they headed south and they passed Israel and went into Africa. So I spoke about that in Part 7. But the Hebrews that was placed in Halah and the Medes, where did they go? So in this section right here, this video presentation, I am going to touch on the topic of where the Hebrews that King Shalmaneser placed in Halah and the Hebrews that he placed in the Medes. What direction did they travel in, or where did they go? So that would be the topic in this presentation. Let's begin. Yes, what happened to the Hebrews that was placed in Halah right above the Tigris River, and what happened to the Hebrews that was placed in the Medes, also way above the Tigris River? Where did they go? Because they did not cross the Euphrates River. And like I mentioned before, the king of Assyria placed the Hebrews in 3 different locations when he carried them across the waters, as the scriptures clearly says. So we are going to now take a look at what happened to the Hebrews that was placed in Halah and in the Medes above the Tigris River. Here is a map of Turkey, the Black Sea. Turkey is the Asia Minor. Okay, well, you see these lines right here. This is the Euphrates River on the bottom. And that's the Tigris River right there above the Euphrates River. Now, as I mentioned before, the Hebrews that was placed in Halah was right above the Tigris River. And then Hebrews was placed in this section right here in the Medes. Right in the Medes, in this area right here. That's the Medes section. Now, as I mentioned before, the Hebrews that was placed above the Tigris in Halah and the Medes, they did not cross the Euphrates River. They went basically west around the rivers, because they had many locations where they can go around the rivers. They didn't have to cross the river. They went around the rivers, and they made their way right in this area right here, what we call Turkey today, by the Black Sea. So they roamed in this area for a while, and then eventually over time they worked their way all the way to Romania and different parts of Europe. And that's how you got black Hebrews in Europe. That's another reason how you got black Hebrews all throughout Europe. And you have to remember, when the Messiah sent his 12 disciples to go teach the lost tribes of Israel, they did not go and take no ships and travel to the Americas like a lot of these Negro-like camps are teaching. No. When the Messiah sent his 12 disciples to go to the lost sheep of Israel, they went right in this area, the Asia Minor, and worked their way in these areas, certain areas of Europe, to teach the lost sheep, the black Hebrews who left from Halah and the Medes. Because like I said, in 2 Kings, the king of Assyria, he also placed Hebrews right above the Tigris River in Halah, and he placed them in the Medes. Both locations are above the Tigris River. So, the Hebrews that was placed in Halah, and you have to understand, Halah is just above the Tigris River, and the Medes is a little more above Halah. The Medes was like in this area right here, where you see this mountain region, the mountain regions, right in this area, that's where the Medes was at. So you can see a gap right here. Wherever you see the blue line is the river. So you can see gaps. You can see a few gaps between the blue lines. So the Hebrews that was placed in Halah and in the Medes by Assyria, when they left, they did not have to cross the rivers. They could simply go around the rivers. They worked their way west towards Turkey, or what we call Turkey today, which is the Asia Minor by the Black Sea. And also they went up in this area right here, up in these areas, Romania, etc., in Europe. So that's how the black Hebrews, many of the black Hebrews got inside Europe. And like I said, the Most High led them to go in this direction right here by Turkey, what we call Turkey today, in which it was called Asia Minor. It's also the Asia Minor by the Black Sea. So they roamed in this area by the Black Sea, and eventually they worked their way in these areas right here. So the Messiah sent his 12 disciples to the lost sheep, and when they went to the lost sheep, they went in these areas right in here. They went in these areas right in here. And Paul did the same thing. Paul went to the sheep, the lost sheep, in these areas also. And I'm going to show this to you. So let's continue. Okay, back to Google Earth map. Let's scroll over to what was called ancient Assyria. Okay? Now, if you look at this line, this thick line right here that's running all the way down, right here, that's going all the way up this way, that is the Euphrates River. That's the Euphrates River. Okay? All the way up here. That's the Euphrates. Now, right in this area, right here, where you see the green going all the way up, that's the Gozan River. And Gozan, the area, the location of Gozan was right in this area right here. Right in this area. And Haran, or harbor, was in this area. Okay? So that's Euphrates. Now remember I said that the Tigris River is 50 miles away from the Euphrates in the widest part, 50 miles away. So all the way up here, now this is the Euphrates, coming all the way up, this is the Tigris River right here. That's the Tigris River. Now Halah was right in this area, right in here, somewhere in this area. Ancient Halah was right here. When it says that the king Salmanazar placed Hebrews also in Halah, just above the Tigris. This is the Tigris River, and it was placed in this area right here. And then if you come on over a little further up in this area is the Medes. The Medes was in this location. All in this area was considered to the Medes, to be the Medes. Okay? So let's make the map a little smaller. Okay. So when the Hebrews fled, when they fled from Halah and the Medes, they went west towards the Asia Minor. Now the Asia Minor, and this is Turkey, the Asia Minor was in this area right here. This is the Asia Minor, this area right here. So they came in this area where you see Turkey today, and they came in this area and dwelt in this area for a while, right by the Black Sea. This is the Black Sea right up here. This is the Black Sea. See that? That's the Black Sea. This is the Asia Minor. So they came in this area right here in the Asia Minor. Okay? Right in this area, the Asia Minor. And eventually they worked their way right through here in Europe, Romania, etc. What we call Romania today. So that is what happened. I just want to show you a up-to-date Google Earth map so you can also get a good understanding of what I am trying to display. How they went and they sojourneyed in this area, what we call the Asia Minor today, of Turkey, right by the Black Sea. And they eventually worked their way through this area to Europe, parts of Europe. So that's how a lot of the black Hebrews got in Europe. Now, some of the black Hebrews also came through this way, from this way in North Africa, and got up in this area in Spain also. But I'm talking about now the Hebrews that was placed in Halah and in the Medes above the Tigris River by the king of Assyria, Salmanazar. They went into this area, the Asia Minor. Okay? Let's continue. Israelites moved around the Black Sea. In 679 BC, the Israelites, or the Gemara, as they were called, fled to the area around the Black Sea. The Greeks gave the same account, but called the Cimmerians. The Assyrian Empire began to weaken. This gave the Israelites a prime opportunity to flee the land of the Medes. The Israelites moved to the area around the Caucasus Mountains. They fought the Uritu and drove them out and settled the area of Phrygia and Uritu. This is modern-day Armenia. So yes, many of the Hebrews that left Halah and the Medes just above the Tigris River, they worked their way to what we call the Asia Minor, which is Turkey today. So they dwelt around the Asia Minor, and eventually they worked their way up to what we call Armenia today in Europe. And eventually they spread it out throughout certain parts of Europe. And that is how a lot of black Hebrews also ended up in Europe. I once seen a video on YouTube of the leader of ISUPK. He was being questioned by a fellow black Hebrew Israelite about his claim, and many of the Hebrew camps claims that the 10 tribes came to the Americas, which is Arsareth. And that's how the native Indians and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, etc., came to the Americas, which is a lie. So this Hebrew brother, he questioned the leader of ISUPK, Yohana, his name is Yohana, about that. And Yohana's response was to the guy who told Yohana, it's no way possible that the Hebrews came to the Americas on ships and boats, because the Messiah did not send his disciples to the Americas, to the lost house of Israel, when he commanded the 12 disciples to go teach the lost sheep. So Yohana, the leader of ISUPK, his response was, well, it is our job to teach the lost sheep, or the house of Israel, that's over here in the United States. That is what we are doing now in the streets. So basically he's saying that the Messiah made a mistake, I guess. The Messiah didn't know what the hell he was talking about. When the Messiah, Yeshua, told the 12 disciples to go to the lost sheep and teach, because you have to remember, the 12 disciples even came back to the Messiah and told him what people were saying. And the Messiah said, who were the people saying that I was? And the people were saying different things. They were saying different things about who the Messiah was. So the 12 disciples, they went out and taught the lost sheep. So I guess the Messiah made a mistake, according to the leader of ISUPK. I guess the Messiah, Yeshua, he didn't know what he was talking about, huh? When he told, I guess he made a mistake when he told his disciples to go to the lost sheep and teach. I guess he made a mistake because he didn't send them over to the Americas. So the Messiah made a mistake, huh? These Negro-like camps, man, ain't nothing but devils, man. All of them. ISUPK, IUIC, GMS, all of them are under that West One doctrine from Ariah, Mashah, false prophets, etc. And they still hold on to that false, wicked-ass 12-tribe chart to this day. I recommend everybody to watch the video called The Alphabet Boys. It's by a brother named Jacob Israel. He's based in St. Louis. He is exposing all of these camps. It's called The Alphabet Boys. He has about maybe 4 or 5 different series. The Alphabet Boys. Check that out. Let's continue. So the Messiah sent his disciples to the lost sheep. Let me read this passage real quick. The Messiah and the disciples were sent to the lost house of Israel. That proves that the Messiah and the disciples knew exactly where the 12 tribes of Israel were located. They were not in Judea. For the most part, Judea was composed of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. So I think it meant to say here, that proves that the Messiah and the disciples knew where the 10 tribes was located. I think the person who wrote this made a mistake right there. They were not in Judea. For the most part, Judea was composed of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin only. Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. These 12 disciples sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans, and enter ye not. This is the Messiah telling the 12 disciples where to go. And then it says, verse 6, But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, The kingdom of the heaven is at hand. And that is exactly That is exactly what the 12 tribes did. They went out to the lost sheep and taught. And then later they came back. They returned later and reported to Yeshua, the Messiah, what happened. That is a fact. That is in the gospel. They did not come to the Americas. Period. After the disciples returned from the different cities and towns teaching the lost sheep, Jesus, according to Matthew chapter 16, he asked the disciples, what did the people say about him? Who did the people say that he was? Verse 13. Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. And it says, when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Verse 14. And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. He said unto them, this is Jesus talking again, but whom say ye that I am? Verse 16. And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Verse 17. And Jesus answered and said to him, blessed art thou, Simon, by Jonah, for flesh and blood have not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. Verse 18. And I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So Yeshua asked the disciples who the people say he was. So that goes to show you that the disciples went out. They did go out among the people in different cities and towns to teach the lost sheep. In the Asia, what we call the Asian Minor, and certain parts of Europe, and certain parts of the Middle East, etc., they did not come to the Americas. That is false teachings by these new doctrines that a lot of these camps are teaching. They did not come to the Americas. Here is a map of the Asian Minor to prove that many of the Hebrews went towards the Asian Minor after they left Assyria. They went to the Asian Minor. The Hebrews that was placed in Halah and the Medes above the Tigris River, indeed, many of them went west into the Asian Minor. The king of Assyria, when he carried the Hebrews to Assyria, the scriptures clearly says that he carried them across the waters. The waters with an S at the end of water. Waters. He placed them in 3 locations. He placed them in Gozan by the river Euphrates. He placed them in Halah, right above the Tigris River. And he placed some of the Hebrews in the Medes, a little further up, also above the Tigris River. Now, I spoke about the Hebrews, according to 2nd Ezra, leaving Gozan and going across the Euphrates River, as mentioned in 2nd Ezra, that they went south past Israel because they had no reason to stay in Israel or to stop in Israel, and continue past Israel and went into Africa. which took them a year and a half to get all the way to the west coast of Africa, because they had to stop. They had children, they had women, they had elderly people. They had to stop, they had to rest, they had to hunt for food, they had to gather water for the people, etc. But the Hebrews that was placed above the Tigris River in Halah, and that was placed in the Medes. It doesn't say in 2nd Ezra where those Hebrews went, because those Hebrews that was placed in Halah and in the Medes above the Tigris River, they did not cross the Euphrates River. So which way did they go? They went towards the Asia Minor. They journeyed in the Asia Minor and also worked their way into Europe. Eventually, they worked their way into Europe. Now, this is a map of the Asia Minor. This is a map that shows where the Apostle Paul went to preach to the sheep, the lost sheep of Israel. And it is numbered, and it shows the different towns or cities, etc., where the Apostle Paul went to teach. This shows that the Hebrews indeed went to the Asia Minor, because the Apostle Paul, he went into the Asia Minor to teach. This was the Apostle Paul's first journey. This was the first mission that he had when he went out to preach the Gospels. He went to Antioch, right here, above Israel, also going towards Assyria, Antioch. He went to Salamis, Paphos, Iconium, Antioch, Artelia, Lystra, Derbe. He went to all of these different towns or cities, locations, etc., in the Asia Minor to preach the Gospels. Yes, Paul went to the Asia Minor to teach the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He did not go to the Americas. Paul did not take any ships or boats to the Americas. And the Gospels mention Paul taking ships, getting on ships and boats and traveling to different islands within the Asia Minor, between the Asia Minor and North Africa, to go teach the lost sheep. The Messiah, he told Paul to go to the house of Israel, the lost sheep, to teach the Gospels. And that is exactly what Paul did. So Paul went to the house of Israel, the lost sheep, to teach. But he did not go to the Americas. Why Paul did not go to the Americas to teach in South America, Central America, and North America? Why he did not go to the Americas to teach? Because the 10 tribes never came to the Americas. Paul was not coming to the Americas to teach a bunch of heathen South American naked Indians who are not Hebrews, as you see in these pictures. These heathen South American Indians are not Hebrews. You dumb Negro-likes. Can't you see? They are not our people. They was here. They was here long before Columbus, long before any man dwelt in the South Americas. These South heathen Indians, South American Indians, they were here. They have the same customs as the African Hamites, the same exact customs. But yet, they are not included on the 12 tribe chart. But they are in the Americas. Why are they not on the 12 tribe chart? When many of these Negroites teach that Arsareth was America, and on their wicked 12 tribe chart, they have Indians placed in the Caribbeans, in South America, Central America, and North America, which makes up all the Americas. So, what tribe do these heathen Indians come from? Because if you say that all of the Americas was desolate, and you have Indians covering all the Americas from North to South America, Brazil to the Caribbeans, then these Indians must have came over, as you say, on boats and ships, and that they are part of the 10 tribes that came over, which is blasphemy. I haven't had one Negro yet. One Negro told me which tribe does these South Central American Indians come from. All I have been getting is crickets. That's it. A bunch of crickets. The book of Nehemiah or Nehemiah. Now he was in Persia after the Babylonian Empire fell, and he asked the king of Persia permission to return to Jerusalem and Israel to rebuild the temples and to rebuild throughout all the cities of Israel after the Babylonians destroyed the temples and the cities. So Nehemiah, he got permission from the king of Persia to return to Jerusalem and Israel to rebuild. So that is exactly what he did. He returned and he rebuilt. Now, after he rebuilt, many of the Hebrews returned back to Jerusalem and Israel throughout the cities, throughout all the cities. Let's read chapter 7, starting with verse 4 in the book of Nehemiah, or some may say Nehemiah. Chapter 7, starting with verse 4. And we read, the captives who returned to Jerusalem. Now the cities was large and spacious, but the people in it were few, and their houses were not rebuilt. Let's go up to verse 5. Verse 5. Then my God put it into my heart. This is Nehemiah talking. Then my God put it into my heart to gather the nobles, the rulers, and the people, and that they might be registered by genealogy. And I found a register of the genealogy of those who had come up in the first return, and found it written therein. So Nehemiah just said that he found the genealogy of all the Hebrews that came up the first time, the first batch or the first set of Hebrews that returned to Israel and Jerusalem. He found their register, their genealogy. Verse 6. These are the people of the province who came back from captivity of those who were carried away, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away captive, and who returned to Jerusalem and Judah, everyone to his own city. And then Nehemiah breaks down the names of all the people. And as you can see in yellow, it has his name. Okay? And then as you continue, he breaks down the people and the amount of people returning. Now I am going to randomly just scroll down and read the people and the amount of people. Verse 20, the children of Adin, 655 people came. Verse 22, the children of Hashum, 328 people returned from the children of Hashum. Verse 25, the children of Gibeon, 95. All right, let's go to verse 29. Like I said, I am randomly reading verses. Verse 29, the men of Kajas, Jerim, Chephirah, and Beeroth, 743. You have to bear with me. Some of these names are kind of hard to pronounce. Verse 30, the men of Ramah and Gerba, 621. Keep on scrolling down. Verse 34. The children of the other Elam, 1,254 people came, the children of the other Elam. I'm going to scroll down to, let's say, verse 38. The children of Sina, 3,930 people. The 39. Verse 39, the priests, the children of Jediah, the house of Jeshua, 973 people. Verse 43, the Levites, the children of Jeshua, Kadmiel, and the children of Hadavah, 74. And like I said, as you keep scrolling down, you will see the amount of children and the people. Let me read one more. Verse 45. The gatekeepers, the children of Shallum, the children of Attar, the children of Talmon, the children of Akub, the children of Hatita, the children of Shobiah, 138. And then it has a breakdown of all the people returning. And you continue to read, and it keeps going over all the breakdowns of the people. All the breakdowns of the people, and they're returning. And then you get down to verse 73. And this is the key, verse 73. And it says, so the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, some of the people, the Nethinims, and all Israel dwelt in their cities. It says all of Israel dwelt in their cities. Let me read that one more time. So the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, some of the people, the Nethinims, and all Israel dwelt in their cities. So he says that all of Israel dwelt in their cities after the return. That goes also to show that the 10 tribes did not come to the Americas, because many returned back to Jerusalem, and Israel, after Nehemiah went back and rebuilt Jerusalem and the cities. Let's continue. Let's go to the book of First Chronicles. Because in the book of First Chronicles, it also talk about the Hebrews returning back to Jerusalem or Israel after Nehemiah went back to rebuild. And in First Chronicles, it also touched on the genealogies of the people and who returned back to Jerusalem and Israel after the cities were rebuilt. Let's start with chapter 9, verse 1. And let's read verse 1 through 3, starting with chapter 9. And it reads, so all Israel, there we go again, all Israel. So all Israel was recorded by genealogies, and indeed they were inscribed in a book of the kings of Israel. But Judah was carried away captive to Babylon because of their unfaithfulness. Verse 2, and the first inhabitants who dwelt in their possessions in their cities were Israelites, priests, Levites, and the Nethinims. Let me read verse 2 one more time. And the first inhabitants who dwelt in their possessions in their cities were Israelites, priests, Levites, and the Nethinims. Let's continue to verse 3. Dwellers of Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, the children of Judah dwelt, and some of the children of Benjamin, and of the children of Ephraim, and Manasseh. Did I just hear Manasseh and Ephraim? Let me read that one more time. Dwellers in Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, the children of Judah dwelt, and some of the children of Benjamin, and of the children of Ephraim, and Manasseh. But according to that false 12-tribe chart, which was created by Arsareth, that a lot of these Negro-like camps are following, they have Ephraim and Manasseh on that chart as Puerto Ricans and Cubans. They have Ephraim and Manasseh on that chart as Puerto Ricans and Cubans, when in fact it just says here that Ephraim and Manasseh also was part of the first set of Hebrews to return to Jerusalem and Israel after Nehemiah went back to rebuild the temples. That also puts a nail in that coffin, in that theory that the 10 tribes came over to the Americas. Let's continue. Let's quickly go to the book of Matthew, starting with chapter 10. Let's see if Yahushua sent the 12 disciples to go to the lost sheep in the Americas to teach. Let's start with verse 5, and let's see where Yahushua sent his 12 disciples to go teach the Gospels to the lost sheep. Let's start with verse 5. Sending out the 12. And it reads, these 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Provide neither gold nor silver, nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs, for a worker is worthy of his food. Now whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and say, there will you go out. And when you go into a household, greet it. If the household is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whoever will not receive you nor hear your words, when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust from your feet. Assuredly, I say unto you, it would be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. The book of Matthew, chapter 10, starting with verse 5, Yahushua gave directions to his 12 disciples to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, or Israel, to teach They did not, the 12 disciples did not go to the Americas to teach the house of Israel, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The Most High did not guide any of the 10 tribes to go all the way to the Western Hemisphere on boats or ships to the Americas. Yahushua sent his 12 disciples to the lost sheep, not to the Americas. They went looking and preaching to the lost sheep of the house of Israel in the areas of what we call the Middle East today, and the Asia Minor, and the African regions, etc. They did not go to the Americas. Period. So that is the end of this video session.